Good evening and welcome. It is Saturday, February 14th, 2026, and this is the continuing, ongoing special coverage of the Nancy Guthrie case from Courtroom Confidential, the fastest growing true crime news channel on YouTube. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. As you can tell, I'm back in Los Angeles just for a couple of days, though, because it looks like things are continuing to move along, advance, update, and I'm hoping getting towards some sort of ultimate conclusion. And then on top of that, I'm hoping it's a good one out in Tucson. So I think I'm actually probably heading out there late tomorrow evening. But Racer Girl and Therapist You Know and Proud Grizzly, Amanda RNC, Kathleen Craghead. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. All the new names and faces I see as well. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're going to have a really great conversation because we have a really great guest, and there are some things to update you on. I don't think this is kind of the same as it was yesterday at all, but some interesting developments on those developments, and I'll explain more a little bit what I mean by that. But let me introduce myself to everybody who's new. My name is Joshua Ritter. I'm a former prosecutor with the LA District Attorney's Office. I left there to go into private practice as a criminal defense attorney, and we started this channel, Courtroom Confidential, with the idea of presenting you both sides of the courtroom and both sides and every side of every issue. So we've been covering Nancy Guthrie every day with developments for the past over a week. This is day 14 now that she has gone missing. Usually I don't go live on Saturdays, so we're doing this special, and we're going to try to do it as much as we can, as long as we can, until there's hopefully a conclusion, and like I said, a happy one to this case. As always, please stay to the end. We do have some announcements for you, some special things coming up. But in the meantime, take a deep breath, hit that like button if you haven't already, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with anyone that you think might enjoy it. But I want to introduce to you a former New York inspector, colleague of mine, and now good friend, Paul Mauro. Hey, Paul, how are you doing?
I am doing good. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. I'm tired. I'm sure you're tired. We've been kind of going off of running on empty for the last few days. As we follow this, I can't imagine what law enforcement people are going through who are actually really in the weeds on this. But I'm going to start off by asking you the question that it seems like everybody who's been following this has been asking each other as soon as they see each other, which is, what do you got? So what do you got, Paul?
Well, first of all, I know that there is a tendency here to say, oh, this is a Keystone Cop situation. It's a mess. They're running around bumping into each other. They don't know what they're doing. But I would just say, hold that thought for now, because these are the kinds of things you do in law enforcement when you have a very complicated investigation. The difference here is that half the world is watching it because of the horrific circumstances and the connection to a well-known person in Savannah Guthrie. But I can't tell you how many investigations, long-term terrorism investigations or intelligence investigations or other types of investigations. I never had a kidnapping that went on this long, but I can tell you that investigations where we had, let's say, 16 subjects, 18 subjects identified that we were really interested in. You do things like, okay, let's get a search warrant. Let's pick this guy up. We have a wiretap on this guy. Let's pick him up and see, and then let him go because we have enough, but you know what? We won't arrest him. We'll leave him out there and see what he does. Things like that. And those are just techniques that law enforcement does all the time to do things like, as they call it, tickle the wire, which is to see somebody, if somebody talks on a wiretap, or if you have, let's say, an informant into the group, to see what they talk about amongst themselves. The difference is you never hear about it. It's very common in, let's say, like a wise guy case, a mafia case, right? So you got, or a crew, a drug crew or something. You got an informant, they're in there. You do things like this. The difference here, as I said, is that aside from the publicity, you have Nancy Guthrie in the mix, somebody that you're going on the assumption is alive and needs to be rescued. And so everybody wants a fast resolution. And as a result, everything that you see that doesn't result in her return immediately feels like a failure. They're following their best leads. They're getting legal process. They're getting court-ordered search warrants. So they got something. And I can tell you that aside from the Guthrie family, nobody wants her home safe and sound, and the perpetrator, or plural perpetrators, under arrest more then the members of that task force who, as you said, are not eating, not sleeping, running around all day and night, living a very, very tense life right now under a lot of scrutiny.
Yeah, under a microscope. They know too. They know that every move they make is being analyzed. They
Oh,
know
yeah,
that they're
forget about
getting
it. Yeah.
they know that they're getting some heat too. They know that they're getting some criticism. I mean, they're not immune to it. But I'm so glad that you said that. We don't know if that's taking place here, but it could be strategic that they're making contact with some of these people, like you said, and then letting them go because
Right.
it's kind of one of those things where you kick the bushes and see if that causes anybody else to react. It could be, and again, we don't know this, but it could be that they have other people under surveillance and they move in on one person that they think is connected to see how that other person reacts. Does that person take off to Mexico when they're out arresting his buddy? Again, it doesn't seem like anything has developed to support that hypothesis, but these types of things do happen. So the latest that we know about, and I'm glad that you said too about legal process, is that they rolled out late last night. I landed, I think we're talking about 9:30, 10 p.m. on the West Coast. So it was past midnight. I know that you and I were both on Fox talking about this. And it's same thing as it had happened about a few days prior in the week. A bunch of SWAT units rolled out earlier in the day. Then we hear about a detention. It sounds like last night it was 2 people. This is my understanding, and I'm not even sure if this is right because I've heard a couple of different things. But my current understanding is that they go to a home within about 2 miles of where Nancy Guthrie lives, just a little bit north of her. They go there and they detain 2 people, a male and a female, at that home. And then later, down the street, but it's still in the vicinity, they make a traffic stop of a vehicle, a Range Rover, by the way, which is kind of an interesting wrinkle in all of this that no one's really talked about. Not exactly a beat up, early model Hyundai or something, but a Range Rover. And that third person, also a male, is detained, handcuffed, and put in the back of a car. So one of the first things I want to talk about with you is everybody seems to really be trying to parse these words: detained, arrested, suspect, subject. Is that something we should be even getting caught up on when you're talking about somebody who's obviously not free to go?
I would not. The only metric that I would pay any attention to if I'm in the general public watching this is the use of the term arrest. You get somebody arrested, you're into something very different. Unless, of course, it is a sort of strategic arrest. That is to say, they pick somebody off because they're driving without a driver's license. And they do that so they can impound the car. And then now that they have the car, they get a search warrant on the car to see if they pick up, something indicative of Nancy Guthrie. But short of that, we haven't crossed the Rubicon in this thing until you hear that they made arrests relative to her disappearance. That's the real metric that you want to watch, because short of that, a lot of this stuff could be strategic, or excuse me, let's face facts. They could just swung and missed. All right, they might have got enough to say, let's get in there and get on these guys. It looks like a good lead. We got a good informant. And the standard for this kind of a stuff of a thing is a little bit squishy. It's different between federal and state, but generally what it comes down to is you need a corroborated source, somebody who's telling you the information, and you have some other corroboration. In some cases, it can be the fact that the source, the informant, has told you good, true information in the past. I doubt that's the case here. This feels to me like somebody called in a tip. They worked that tip. Then they looked at it and said, okay, this guy's phone has been in the area, or this guy's car has been in the area. Some other indication. They did some electronic stuff, and they ascertained that, okay, he's got priors for something similar. So then we got maybe a cyber warrant, a quick cyber warrant. We see him doing some Google searches that are very concerning. And so that's how they got over the bar. And then they went in, and it just was a swing and a miss. It wasn't the guys. And that could definitely be the case. You go in with your best information, you give it a shot, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So That could very well be what happened as well. It's not always strategic. You and I are thinking that way, but in this case, they might have just thought that they had her. And I just would mention there's probable cause and there's probable cause. And when you have an 84-year-old woman that most of the country is really, really hoping that we get back, there's all this pressure. If your judges are human too, and I would say in a kidnapping case with the clock ticking, the bar for the various legal process you would need here, subpoenas, search warrants, whatever it is, going to be search warrants in a case like this, that bar lowers. And a judge is going to say, okay, I see this. The tip looks pretty good. And okay, I see this, GPS information for the car. That's enough. I can sleep with this. I'm not worried about being overturned on this. Here's your warrant, officer. Godspeed. So I think that's likely the way it went. And they also, I think, armed with that warrant, I think it was a fairly strategic move, even if it was just a swing and a miss in how they executed. You're saying that they did the house and then the car. I thought it was the reverse, but irrespective. What they, I think, did, because you and I think I had left, but you might have still been there. But I heard on the way to the airport as I'm leaving town that they rolled out the attack vehicles again, SWAT and all of them. Yeah. So they had the bomb squad. And so what they did there, it looks to me, it was well before the hit, well before they call it a rip, well before they did the rip on the car and all of this. So they probably staged someplace out of sight of media. And they might have had a couple of cars and maybe some aerial assets kind of stuff following the car in question, or any movement from the house, to see if they could pick up anybody moving towards something that could be where Nancy is. A separate home, a storage location, something in the desert, because there's miles of desert out there. And eventually somebody had to say, okay, we're not going to wait anymore. They're not leading us anywhere. Maybe she's in that house. Somebody makes the call. I assume the Pima County Sheriff, in conjunction with the Bureau, says, let's go. And then, they pull the car over, they grab this guy, and they do the rest of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't want the point to be lost too on what you're saying, that in investigations like this, just anytime you're looking for a violent person, there are swings and misses, and this is part of the job. Is that you are going to find a hot lead, get some warrants, go out and make an arrest, and maybe that doesn't turn up anywhere. That doesn't mean that the investigation has come to some sort of standstill and that you're flailing around with no real end in sight. It's just, in this case, they do it, and all of a sudden it makes the nightly news, and it's on the constant news loop for the next 24 hours, and it makes it look worse than it is. Right. The other thing I want to highlight about what you said is, yes, I think you're absolutely right that there's probably every judge out there that's getting a warrant put in front of them knows what's going on. And I don't think they're going to be quick to say, I can't sign this thing. I think they're going to be pretty forgiving of the affidavits they're getting. Not that means it's all a rubber stamp, but they understand the seriousness of this as well. But the other thing that's happening here is that since that surveillance video came out of the suspect, the local law enforcement everybody received 4,000 tips within the first 24 hours. And my understanding of last count is it was approaching and probably over 20,000 tips at this point. That is drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
And why I highlight that is that law enforcement, FBI, local Pima County Sheriff, is not going to roll out the SWAT trucks and all of those units and all of those resources because in those 20,000 tips, they saw one that sounded kind of good. I guess what I'm saying is that if they're going to dedicate those resources, you can imagine whatever they had on this one was pretty good. And it looked like that. Doesn't mean it's not good now, but it certainly has not led, at least at this point, to charges being filed. All of that sound about something you would agree with?
Yeah, and we still could get charges. I know that they're waiting for some forensics to come back, and if the forensics come back from, let's say, the house, they're doing apparently some more penetrative DNA testing. If the forensics come back to somebody in that house, now you got enough. And one of the things, I mentioned tickling the wire. Generally, that refers to a wiretap. But if it is somebody that's in and among the crew that were grabbed left, and there's disparate reporting, it's 3 bodies, it's 4 bodies. However many people they shook last night, one of the things you do after you do something like this, if you don't have an arrest, and this is not some deep dark tradecraft, it's just common sense, is you say, make sure you separate everybody. Everybody gets interviewed individually, see what they have to tell you. Sometimes all of a sudden they start blaming each other and okay, well, we're in the right place. But one of the things you do before you leave is, here's my card. And if there's anything you want to tell us, be sure to contact me. And, the idea being, everybody, I think, kind of knows it. And sometimes you can just say it. The first person to call us gets the deal. And if it is something where you have a collusion among a crew of people, then, somebody very well may call and say, I'm thinking about this. What can you offer me? The one thing I would say that cuts against these guys being being who we're looking for here. And this, maybe the fact that we got a tip undercuts this, but I can tell you that if you got 3 people involved, you got 40 people involved, because the only way a secret of this magnitude is generally kept is if it's one person. You see that with the serial killer cases, and even then they move around, guy like Bundy, that kind of stuff, But if there's another person who knows about it, they talk. Yeah. And I don't care how much they swear to each other, they're not going to talk. There's always a continuum on the edges of things where you have a few people involved, of people who are semi-involved or hear about it over drinks or something. And, I'll go back in time to a case. I don't think I was born, but there was a famous case here in New York where a group of people stole the Star of India, which was one of the most famous gems in the world at the time. It was on a world tour. It was here in India. Museum of Natural History screwed up their burglar alarms and their defensive measures completely. And they just got very, very lucky. They rappelled down into a window and they stole this thing. And it was while the whole city was lining up to go have a look at it. I only bring that up because it was a very, very, very public thing. Everybody was watching. Oh my, who stole the Star of India? Where is it? Is it in town? And ultimately, because it was a crew of people, a couple of them they'd fled to Florida, a few of them, and they got drunk in a bar and started talking about it to impress women. And one of the women in the bar said, "This guy sounds like he's legit." Called the police, and they rolled them up. They got the thing back, and that's the end of it. It's a crazy story, but it just comes to mind as an example of a case where there were all kinds of motives to be quiet, because these guys had hit the jackpot, carved up. The thing was worth it was literally almost, it was almost priceless. The Star of India carved up, it was still worth an unfathomable amount of money. I think it was the largest sapphire in the world or something. And they blew it by talking in a bar after having a couple of beers. They would, they were perps, and perps very often don't go into that line of work because of their stellar SAT scores. And so as a result, they do dumb things. And so you hope for something like that as well. And that's why I still lean, and this is just a theory now, I want to be careful, I don't know anything. I just still lean a solo actor here. I don't know what it is, but I do.
I agree with you. I don't think that we should read into the idea that more than one person was detained. I think one person was the target of this recent activity. My kind of running theory, because I've seen how police act in the past, is that it's likely the person that was detained, arrested in the traffic stop, because if they know they've got their suspect inside of a house, it's much easier and safer for them to stop that person in a car than it is in the house, because they could barricade themselves. Now we're dealing with a hostage situation, but they wait for him to leave. They hook him up down the road, and then they go in on the house just to make sure that they can secure that and nobody's flushing anything down the toilet. And that might be why we have separate locations and all those people involved. But we haven't been told any of this. That's just kind of my suspicion. And to your point too, yeah, these guys can't keep their mouth shut. And now there's 100,000 reasons why somebody else might snitch on them too. I mean, the FBI upped their reward to $100,000, which is significant to somebody. You know what I mean? That is a lot of money to say no to when you happen to have heard your cousin get drunk one night talking about what he did. I want to kind of go through, first of all, let me do some thank yous to folks, and then I'm going to go through some latest tweets from reporters who are following this and get your reaction. But 1016 Debs, thank you so much. Says, good to see you today. Appreciate that. Annalie Finch, thank you. Says, welcome home, Josh. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. KMTX says, I hope you've gotten some sleep watching here and on Fox. Well, I appreciate you checking out everything we're working on. Curious Crime just gifted a membership. Thank you for that. Granite Man says, can this be a serial crime or a one-off offense? This doesn't sniff at all of a person who's, you know, a career kidnapper. To me, this seems like a crime gone bad. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I don't think it's a career guy. A career guy, first of all, would have walked up anticipating a Ring camera, a Nest camera, and the tape goes right over the camera. And in fact, a really career guy, a really experienced guy, wouldn't have been at the front door at all. He would have gone around back, right? Yeah. Which is where I think he probably got in. You know, the people out there tell me, I don't know anything much about that. But it's the first time I've been in Arizona, that part of the country. Beautiful area, very sort of, you know, austere desert landscapes that go all the way to the horizon. And then there's mountains in the distance. To me, it looks like a postcard, but the house is there. Even like this is $1 million house. It's one story because they got land out there. They got room. They got the desert. True. So they don't build up, they build out. So there's various ingress and egress points, and there, to my understanding, is at least one that's significantly better than the front door, which is she had some kind of sliding doors. It was her area. Tucson is no bargain when it comes to crime. Tucson City has some issues, but she's in outside of it. That's why Pima County Sheriff caught the case, and they tell me that where she was is like the equivalent of a gated community. It was extremely low crime. Maybe some burglaries, you know, and there's burglaries and there's burglaries. You know, hey, I woke up and somebody stole the blow-up toy out of my pool. I think it's my jerk neighbor. It goes as a burglary, right? So, like, it's not heavy crime stuff. In the area down there, like I said, Tucson, they got some issues. My point is this. She might not even have locked her sliding doors. Sliding doors are strange. 100%. People leave them open. People who will put 3 locks on their front door will leave their back sliding door open. We saw it in the Koberger case, actually, if you recall. He came in the back sliding door, it was left open. So that is where I think maybe the misconception came that there had been a breaking and entering. He said, I didn't see any sign of forcible entry. This is the sheriff talking at the last press conference. I don't know where that's coming from. I think what likely happened is it leaked through the task force that he came in the back door, but it wasn't forcible. He just opened the door, the sliding door. But the front door where we saw him, those doors are heavy oak. It's almost a decorative thing. It's that oval-topped doorway that you see in these adobe homes. They look like something out of the Old West, and they're big, thick, heavy doors. If that's locked, short of being a very good locksmith, like you're not forcibly entering through that front door. It'll take forever. You wake up half the neighborhood. So a guy who's experienced at this stuff and did any kind of recon at all, or is from the area and knows all of this, goes through the back door, I would say, well, it doesn't even come near the front door where there's a Ring camera. Never mind the nonsense with putting the bush and all sort of silliness. So I don't think it's a career person. I think it's a one-off, fairly local. The thing I've said in the past is, and not the cartels or any of that, because I think that's way too fanciful, but my fear here is that it is a local who is an undocumented Mexican, and the illegal Mexican that comes in and then leaves, because that person's going to have no footprint, operating off of cash, making money, however. And that's very, very difficult person to track, however you feel about our border situation, just from the standpoint of trying to find somebody's footprint to track them from purchases and things like that. Somebody who's been living in a sort of nether world of citizenship is just a very, very difficult person to find. And I actually am wondering, I've been wondering all along here, is if they put those billboards up all over the place, if they've tried to get the word out on the Mexican side of the border. Because you may get somebody down there to say, you know, that looks like the way my cousin walks, and he's a little bit of a sketchy guy. 100,000 American down here is going to go pretty far. I'm going to make a call. And I'm wondering if there's anything going on south of the border relative to this investigation.
Which is not that far away. We're talking about an hour away. So it's right definitely in the zone of possibility. I want to talk about the area that she lives, because this is something that I feel like has been mentioned, but it's a bigger factor in all of this and trying to understand why this crime was committed than I think has been given proper credit from folks online and on TV. So we have a map here of where she lives. It's called the Catalina Foothills. And to your point, it is kind of on the outskirts of Tucson, not in Tucson proper. And it is I would call it kind of a affluent sort of area. But what was remarkable to me about it, because I went out to Nancy's home. Did you get a chance to go out to her home when you were last out there?
Oh yeah, yeah. I've been out
Okay.
the whole where I did the whole drove the neighborhood. In fact,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's all these undulating roads, these kind of
yeah.
rolling hills. Um, not no, there's not a right angle in the area. It
No, no.
looks like scattershot kind of corn maze, a lot of dead ends. Some of the streets are not clearly marked, no street lights whatsoever. Easily a place you can get lost. And the reason I highlight that is, one, you're right, kind of more affluent, not where you would expect just kind of ongoing, Resberg crime to be taking place. But two, I saw that area and I'm like, you have to know where you're going to find this woman's house. And you have to know where you're going to get out of this area quickly if you were trying to. Now, so you see, if you could make the map just a little bit bigger, Kaylin. So you see there's Guthrie's home, and then you can see the new activity, that dot at the top. That's where this recent detention was made. That's in the neighborhood. That's 2 miles away. And the person, you could surmise, I think it would be a reasonable supposition that the person who lived there probably familiar with those streets, those winding roads in that neighboring community. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, no wonder this is probably somebody who's good for it. But talk to us about like that area and why it's just, this was not a crime of opportunity, in my view. This was somebody who absolutely had targeted her, probably because she's older, vulnerable, and lived alone with no alarm system and no dog. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And further to your point, and I agree with all that. And further to your point, he's not putting a GPS on because they'd have him already.
Right. Yeah.
So if he
Oh
had a
God,
small,
that's a great point. He wasn't using a mapping app to get in and out of there. He knew where he was going. Yeah.
right, right. And so easy to get lost in it. I did. We were driving around, and I said, "How do I get out of here now?" And I just followed the app, and it's one of those things where I stuck it in Waze, excuse me, to get out, and it was like make a right, make a left, make a right, like every couple of blocks, every whatever minute or so. The other thing about the area, it feels like a gated community. It's not, but it might as well be. You're on like a kind of like not a highway. You're on like a wide, like 3 lane, sort of commercial-ish street. It reminds me of Florida. It's all like big roads with strip malls. That's the whole, and then everything else is off these big roads. And then you'll have these residential areas that they don't have gates, but like you come into a neighborhood. Out by her, what happens is you're on one of those, but it starts to get more and more rural.
Yeah.
And you're getting what commercial stuff you have is like it's an acre and it's a car lot or something, they're selling auto parts or something. And it's nice. It starts to get nicer. It starts to get more desert landscape. You make a right off this main road and you enter the thing you're talking about. And it's this sort of slalom of streets. They're paved, but it doesn't really feel it. It feels like you're in desert kind of terrain.
Barely paved. No curbs,
Barely
no sidewalks, just kind of barely paved. Yeah.
It's like driving a golf course.
Yeah.
Right. Except that instead of it being green, it's brown. It's desert brush. And the houses sit on a lot of land and they're well back from the street. In some cases, you can't see the house. Most you can because the desert terrain is sparse. It's not heavy shrubbery and, it's cactuses and all of this, cacti. So the point I was going to make is, in addition to what you're saying, obviously you had to come in with a car. There's a vehicle in the mix here no matter what.
100%.
Now, we know that there was a car parked there, a van that was parked there for a few days, or a few days before, rather, for some length of time. How long is a little unclear. And it was so ostentatious by being parked on that street for, I don't think it was overnight. It sounds like it was there a couple of hours, but it had no markings or anything, that the neighbors called the police, and the police came because, this was unusual. By the time they got there, it sounds like the van was gone and nobody got the plate. But my point is, because otherwise they would have just washed that out initially, and the police didn't say, like, yeah, we investigated the van and it was a dead end. It turns out it was a plumber that parked on the street. The point is, you wouldn't park on the street. The guy had a vehicle. And I don't know where he put that vehicle. If he rolled the dice and put it in somebody else's driveway, I mean, maybe, that would have taken a real knowledge of the fact that somebody else wasn't home. Because there's somebody in that neighborhood, as we said, it's affluent. They wake up, they see a strange car in their driveway in the middle of the night. They call the cops probably. So that tells me almost certainly he parked in her driveway, which was not gated.
Interesting point. Very
right.
interesting.
So, and it has to be just, he got lucky here. It's not far off camera of that Nest camera, because it's not that big up in the front.
And remember, he likely doesn't know there's a Nest camera.
Right. So he parks the car. He comes up to the front door for some stupid reason to play around with it. I don't think he comes in there, maybe tried it to see if it was open. But it's just off camera there. And it's just a bad break that you didn't get the car. And I think it's one of the reasons why they're so focused on the neighbors, saying, do you have any footage that you can supply, because it's dark and everything else, but it's such a time specific thing. It's like 1:30 to 3 o'clock the night of, in the middle of the early morning, I guess I should say. That's when he was there, and they just missed the vehicle. They should have tire tracks. And so I'm surprised we haven't gotten a metric like, we're looking for a sedan, we're looking for a truck, we're looking for a Range Rover. We know that in the latest hit that they did, they took a Range Rover, they put it up on the back of a flatbread, they took it for examination. What do they call it? A flat top? What do they call those big tow trucks? Flatbed, right? Everett.
You're too hungry.
I don't even own a car. I mean, like, this stuff is arcane to me. They put it on the flatbed and they haul the thing out of there, and they're going to be going over it, I'm sure, with a fine-tooth comb. But the vehicle thing is very interesting for all the reasons that you say. He had to know the area. You couldn't leave it. The streets are narrow too. Like, in some instances, it's very hard for another car to go past you. You got to go inch up onto somebody's lawn almost. So he doesn't leave it on the street. That's my opinion. Maybe he did. It's also, we know that, theoretically here he carried her. It's a long way. I think he drives into the driveway. He's parked just, if you're looking at the video we've all seen, to the left of the frame. He's parked, I would guess, where there's a way to get in with the driveway. There's no gate, so he just drives right in. He kills the engine. Obviously, he kills the lights, and he does what he does from there. But the vehicle in this case, I think, was right there. And we don't talk about it much because everybody says, "Oh, we didn't get any red light cameras or something like that." Okay, it was swing and a miss on that. But I think that there's probably some stuff they know about the car that we don't know, and I'm surprised they haven't put it out. If nothing else, the size of the tires and what that indicates about the car.
Yeah. No, everything you just explained fits into everything we already know. I want to thank some folks for supporting us, and then I want to get into what's the latest with the people that they've detained and what you imagine they might be doing with them right now. But thank you to DBLHTR. I always say, ask who is benefiting. Any of the IG influencers or you YouTubers making themselves suspicious because they're making click cash. That's an interesting theory I hadn't put together as well.
That kind of puts you in the mix.
I know. I was going to say.
I think actually to that point, no, it's a good question, though, and I don't mean to joke, but it's a good question because you do have to ask who benefits, and you got to think then, is there a will? Is there some sort of trust in the states issue? And I think that's why you hear all this stuff about the family and everything else. But let's be clear. The task force has been very, very forward-leaning on saying everybody's in the mix and nobody's in the mix. And I think that they've made it very, very clear that they're not like focusing on any family member.
Yeah. Which is kind of frustrating, I'm sure, too, for them. Like, it would be nice if he could be clear about that. But
right.
Karen Moore, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. Welcome aboard. Heather Cooper Smith, thank you for the super sticker. So kind of you. And Potter, thank you for the super sticker. You guys are fantastic. Arizona gal, who's actually, I think, relatively local, says, I haven't slept well this week. I can only imagine what the Guthrie family is feeling. Praying for Miss Nancy is brought some safely home soon. All of us are sending out many prayers on this. Therapist, thank you for gifting a membership. Kim Tannehill, thank you for gifting a membership. So kind of you. Eroy says, in my opinion, the FBI doesn't just do something. I think they know something we don't. I agree with you. The FBI last night was a part of this whole thing, and we were talking to Mike Ruiz, who is a Fox digital reporter who, anytime you're hearing about something happening, he's actually out on the scene giving us information. And he said there was a ton, many dozens of unmarked, who we believe were FBI vehicles rolling out to the location to Eroy's point, they don't do that just on some hunch, which is kind of what I was saying earlier.
No, they got one thing about the Bureau, man, and I had my battles with them. I see these guys now. I ran into a guy that I used to do battle with over cases and stuff 2 New Year's Eves ago in Times Square. That was a very funny thing. It was like, there's all these stories about after the Civil War, Northern and Southern guys running into each other, meeting each other and hugging, because it's a little bit of an exclusive club. Right. And the two of us spontaneously hugged, and I haven't seen you. How's your family and everything else? And God, we used to do battle. My point is that, you have to be inside these things to know how they go. And it is a little bit of, it's a subculture. And it has its practices and rules and procedures and all this. And one thing about the Bureau, man, they got procedure. Yeah. You got to remember, the FBI is part of the Department of Justice, DOJ. And who constrains them, at least theoretically, but in a case like this, they're constrained by the Department of Justice attorneys, the prosecutors. And, they do various operational things, and they can do in national security, where I spent a lot of time working, they can write national security letters with pretty much no judicial or lawyer input, attorney input. But short of that, you're constantly going to the U.S. attorney. They like to say they don't. I run the case and everything else, but you got to go to the attorney to write your paper. You got to write, I need a search warrant. I need a wiretap. I need a subpoena. You got to open a grand jury for me. The attorneys have a lot more. But you're not hearing about the attorneys in this case so far, which is interesting. I go to all that to say, the tell to what your viewer, to the point that your viewer is making, is who wrote the search warrant? Was it federal or was it the local prosecutor? I haven't seen an answer on that. I saw something. No. I assumed it was the local prosecutor.
Me too.
But I saw something online, and I don't like to foment internet rumors, but this is not like something that's salacious. I saw something posted from a local reporter that says it was federal.
Interesting.
Now, that's a real tell, because as your viewers said, the FBI just doesn't do stuff. That means the FBI agents had to be convinced this was good. It had to go up. Now you got the whole SAC, special agent in charge that runs Arizona, that's SAC level. So that had to go up through the local guy that was at the press conference that we saw. He's likely ASAC level, assistant special agent in charge. Then it had to go up through the SAC, who was the other guy that was at the press conference, the TOLA agent that was at the press conference. They got to say, yeah, let's go with this. Let's go to the U.S. attorney with this. Now you got the U.S. attorney for probably the whole state. I don't know how the districts out there are broken out, but somebody with some real juice, investigative juice, how to write this thing, and they got to write it, and it's work, and they probably got to write a number of them, and you got to get the details. You got to call the agent. What am I saying here? What do you have? All right, I'll put that in. The judge will think that's compelling, and you got to write this thing, and you got to write a few of them, and then you got to get it in front of a judge, and the judge has to say, okay, I bless this, and you got to get it signed. So then you got to execute, and then you got to take it back, and you got to do what they call a return. And you got to bring it back to the judge and say, this is what we got and this is how it went. And what you're really doing there is demonstrating to the judge that you stayed within the four corners of the search warrant and you didn't go outside of it. All of that is to say that there's a ton of eyes on something like this before they execute. And federally, the Bureau has their procedures. They adhere to them. It can be maddening. Sometimes they would come to me and say, can you guys do this? Because you'll get it done much quicker than we can. So cases that I wasn't even involved in, they would say, you got guys that can go out and do X, Y, Z? It wasn't illegal. It was just stuff that we could do faster. And, there's that's kind of thing that goes on. And then when I was under federal rules, you couldn't do that anymore. I was federalized. But you see what I'm saying? They have procedures that they adhere to, and they're not going to go outside of them. They're very, very risk averse with that stuff. So I would agree with your viewer.
Yeah, that's so funny. When I was you're reminding me when I was in the district attorney's office, this is like on the attorney side of the same issue. sometimes we would deal with the U.S. attorney, and we would, maybe a case they would want to hand to us, or a case that I had that they would want to swallow up into one of their larger prosecutions. And I remember having a conversation with the U.S. attorney. He was talking about all the different levels of approval he would have to get to do something. I forget whatever it was, but it's memos upon memos and all this stuff. And then he asked me, well, who do you need approval to do that? And I go, me. I'm the guy. I'm the guy that approves that. You know what I mean? Like it was, they're just
amazed.
Dealing with, what's that?
And they're amazed. They're like, you can do it.
They're just blown away. It seems like we're in the Wild West compared to what they have to deal with.
I used to feel sorry for them. The agents used to say, everything I do has got to be papered. It's got to go up the chain. They would want it. These guys, listen, I know there's been a lot of people have heaped criticism on the FBI in recent years, and I think that their leadership deserved it, frankly. But the agents are good people. 99.9% of them, they just wanted to do the job. They're not getting paid a lot. They moved them all over the country, all over the world sometimes. And some of this stuff has to go all the way through Washington. They get a lot of, there's a lot of hiney pain, let's call it. All right, I'm being delicate in some of the work that they do, and yet they get it done. So more power to them. We need them.
Yeah. Roy, this is incredibly kind of you. Thank you so much for gifting those memberships. Always appreciate your support. Gutters Pub says one way in and out, incompetence at its finest. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but thank you, Gutters Pub, for the super chat on that. Dr. Vonda K says, thank you so much. Appreciate you. Court Dog Daniel, epic legal and law enforcement team we have here. That's very kind of you, Court Dog Daniel. Roy, wow. Thank you. Very kind. Says, hey, chat, there are a lot of you here right now. Josh, Tiff, Kaylin, and the mods work really hard to bring us factual updates and expert opinions. Please read the rules. Just respect our guests and mods. If you can't be respectful, you're in the wrong place. Thank you for that, Roy. Before I let you go, Paul, I first of all, I didn't ask you when we start how much time you have. So if you got to go, don't be kind to interrupt me.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. But I wanted to get into the latest, people are asking, what are they doing with these people right now? So Matt Finn, first of all, said, well, let me start here with Brian Enton, actually. Brian Enton, News Nation, we've had him on the show. Fantastic guy. He's out there and he's doing a lot of the really good work. One of his last tweets was that the Pima County Sheriff's tells local affiliate KOLD last night's operation was, quote, nothing more than a lead tracked down that led to a search warrant and no arrests. And we kind of talked about that word arrest can be a little bit loaded / unloaded, depending on what you mean by it. Then our Fox's Matt Finn recently tweeted something along those same lines saying, breaking, no arrests last night in Guthrie case and no one in custody. Pima County Sheriff Nanos tells FNC. Again, that use of the word custody is different to me because custody means detained, arrested, whatever. That person's in custody. And then I wanted to show you Brianna Whitney. She is a local reporter who has been really in the weeds on this whole thing. And she said, according to my source, inside source, the wait for information about last night's operations hinges on evidence testing results coming back. I'm told once they are received, which should be today, the FBI will update us on where the investigation stands. Meanwhile, the sheriff says a second person was detained to release, no arrests as of now. Which brings me to my question of what do you think they're doing with these folks? Let's stick to the hypothesis that it was one person they're interested in. What are they doing with that one person right now in your experience?
Well, in a case like this, they're going to make sure that person doesn't go to the border. And so how do you do that? Well, if the person decides they're going to go to the border, it's going to be very difficult to stop them if you don't have probable cause or something like that. You can grab them maybe as a material witness if you have enough of that, but that is an affidavit that has to go in front of a judge as well. And if it's not there, you're not going to get it. But that said, if the person's not making a run for the border, you're going to keep an eye on them. And in some cases, you're not cute about it. They know that you already rolled up on them. You ripped them out of the car. You did what you did. And so consequently, there's no real reason to be too cute about it. You put a marked car right in front of the house. And,
Yeah.
they go into the store, you follow them. Now you get the continuum, the limiting principle there is harassment. You can't bother them. You can't be, there was a famous case up here in New York. These two guys snatched a young girl named, the case is public, so I can say it. Katie Beers was the name of the case. Terrible case. And I know somebody who worked that case. And what they decided to do, they knew one of the guys was good for it. They knew at least one, there were two pieces involved, but they knew the one guy definitely was in the mix. And he had her. And they were just hoping against hope that she was alive. And it was similar to this in the fact that it went on for a while. And they executed some search warrants at the house, et cetera, and they came up negative. So what they did was they did up close and personal. There's a fancy policey term for it. It's like, oh God, I forget what it says. Personal surveillance or up close and personal surveillance or something. Essentially, they just followed him around, and I mean they followed him around, and they walked next to him, and he goes into the bodega to buy coffee. They're walking next to him and they're going, come on, Sal, do the right thing. We know you took her. Come on, Sal, do the right thing, man. Come on, make a deal.
Being his conscience in his ear. That's funny.
And it worked.
Wow.
And he took him to the house that they had done the search. Listen to this. He took them to the search warrant when he finally broke. He took him to the house rather where they had done the search, where he lived. And he was a carpenter. And he had this crazy mechanism where if you did something with a mantelpiece, you lifted the mantelpiece and pulled it to the right, it activated some kind of a mechanism, and it opened up a stairwell to a room that he had built downstairs that was not visible in the basement, and that's where she was. She was alive.
Wow.
And he had built this this apartment downstairs in his house. So I tell that story I had nothing to do with that case, to be clear. So it's not a war story of mine. I tell it just to demonstrate the point. Like I said, I know somebody who worked it. Sometimes you have to be cute. And if they really like the guy for it and they think this is him, we just got to wait to make sure he doesn't leave. Surveil him. Let him. We used to call it overt. We say, go overt on this guy. We said, knock on the door and tell him, what are you doing? Talk to us here. We know you're involved. If you want to deal, you better talk to us. So they could very well just be in an overt, or it could be something that's a little bit more clandestine. There's various things you can do. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about it, but there are things that they can do. And it all hinges on, I think, whatever they took out of the house and what they took out of the car. They're probably testing for blood, hair, DNA, of course. And, just to be clear, I think to this point, DNA has been a dry well, because the DNA that they got back from the house, that is Nancy's house, is long tested by now, at least for a 1-to-1. And obviously nobody's been arrested for it. But as you and I talked about on the air, Josh, at least on our show on Fox Nation, we haven't even gotten something like, okay, we did the DNA. He comes back as half Mexican, half European, green eyes, et cetera, prone to bone disease. There's all kinds of things you can tell from a good DNA analysis. I don't know that they got good DNA. And if they did, it might not have been a great sample.
Yeah. And part of the thing we're dealing with is they won't even tell us what the status of the DNA is. They just tell us they have it, but they still haven't gotten back to us about the status.
Yeah, it went to Florida. Yeah, I know the lab. It went to a legit lab. I think almost certainly it went to there's one lab that I can find that does the investigative genetic genealogy that I'm boring everybody with, but that's the DNA that's a little bit more penetrative. It doesn't track necessarily to the person. You can get a relative, and then you get a pool of these relatives. You got to find out which relative in a pool of 30 people, 20 people that is actually related to your perp. It becomes a lot of detective work. It's one of the ways they got Koberger, maybe the main way. I think that if they have that and they're doing that, that's the question I asked at the press conference. If they have that, that does take time. Yeah, but that's where that's where not going to the bureau was a mistake, because the FBI is the best at this.
Yeah. I want to put the last thing I want to ask you about, and then I'm going to let you go, is that as we were talking, actually, Matt Finn put up a latest update tweet. And I'm going to just read the thing in its entirety and ask you what your thoughts are on this thing. He says, breaking, Pima County Sheriff's Nano says to expect police activity every day, and gives more details about last night's massive Guthrie police /SWAT activity. Nanos tells Fox the person detained in the traffic stop last night outside Culver's, which we believe involved the gray Range Rover, was a person of interest who was, quote unquote cooperative and later released. And then he goes on to say, regarding any other detainees, quote, I'm guessing anyone at the residence was detained, but that is standard procedure to allow investigators serving a search warrant freedom to conduct their search. I was not at the scene and I'm not sure. I'm sure people were detained, but no one was arrested. And more importantly, no sign of Nancy was found. And then looking ahead, every day moving forward, there will be a lot of police activity throughout the community. As to what level of activity that is depends on what lead they chase and how it develops. These leads start in the command post and move to the field as needed. That is one reason you're seeing activity build up as the day goes on that can ultimately lead to a search warrant looking for Nancy and any suspect involved. This is all a quote from Nanos. I got to say, I'm not entirely impressed with the sophistication of what he's telling all of us, but what are your thoughts? I mean, he's saying like, hey, buckle up, everybody. You're going to see a lot more of this.
Yeah, they're really shaking the trees, huh?
Yeah.
Look, you can do this. I mean, if you got the resources, it's an ongoing case. I shudder to think what's going on if you call 911 in Pena County right now, because it sounds like they got a lot of people working there. I know early on they had a lot of other agencies from around the area coming in to assist. That happened here in New York after 9/11. We were out there, and I think as I was telling you the story, we had guys that came in from the Bureau of Indian Affairs cops. I was working patrol in Hell's Kitchen, New York, Manhattan, with guys from a reservation in South Dakota. So they were feds, but they brought them in to help us on patrol because, excuse me, so many people were downtown working at the site. And as was I most of the time too, but they were cycling us in and out. So yeah, I think that he's telling us that, what, cool your jets. Not everything is going to be world-breaking news. That you may see more executions of search warrants, car stops, people being pulled out, people being quote unquote detained and then let loose. Sounds like the guy was cooperative. That means to me what he did was not only talk to them, but he probably gave a swab, a buccal swab, they sort of cheek swab. They take the Q-tip, they put inside your mouth, and then it goes into the evidence bag, and then it gets off to be tested. That's some of the stuff I'm sure we're waiting to come back. So I think the real thrust of his statement there is, hey, media, calm down. You're going to be seeing more of these. We're going to continue to shake the trees on tips that we get, and just because they're not panning out doesn't mean we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's true. And that I know he's receiving a lot of criticism. I think some of it is deservedly so, but what he's saying is true, and we should all kind of give them the space and patience because he's getting a lot of heat, but that should not bleed over into being a general representation of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. They are working very hard, and they want to get this thing solved.
You and I saw them there day and night. Yeah,
they want to get this solved as much as anybody else. Paul, thank you so much, for carving out a little time to spend with us. Before I let you go, I want to let everybody know about your X account, Paul D. Mauro. You have a website called the Ops Desk. That's opsdesk.org, where you do a lot of work on updating people, and you kind of it's almost like your Substack, right? Or do you have a separate Substack?
It's the outward facing page. A Substack gives you a web page now.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So, it's the outward face. So I write on there. We post videos. It's me and another cop that I know, retired NYPD Major Case, which is actually be an interesting guest for you. I think your viewers might like him. He as the commanding officer of Major Case, his name is Chris Flanagan. He's on the website with us, but Major Case in NYPD handles by procedure all kidnappings. And so he's probably the commanding officer, ranking officer in America who's handled more kidnappings than anybody else.
Oh, wow.
Because they get about one a week, and a lot of them are bogus, but some are not. And he handled something not that there was no celebrity involved, but he handled something not that different from this. Went on about 2-3 weeks. We covered it on the Ops Desk, but so it's that kind of thing. But if you're interested in this kind of stuff, we're over there. Come over, say hello, check it out. And thanks for having me, Josh. It's good to see you, man.
And then we've got the weekly rap sheet. So we've been doing that Well,
Yeah.
they're now kind of, we're doing it as a special presentation. We're calling it Missing Nancy Guthrie, but we've been doing this daily. We didn't do one today, which I'm shocked, but we've been doing it daily for the past week. So please check that out on Fox Nation, everybody. Thank you again, Paul. Good to see you.
Anytime, buddy.
All right, take care. Please, if you're not already following him on Twitter, go do it right now, because he really does have some great insights and follows this stuff. And I think he's just a great guy. And I'm very blessed to have his mentorship through all of this. All right, let me thank some of you that you guys have been so patient and so supportive. So let me thank some folks, and then I'll give you some parting announcements. But Sophia, wait a minute. Somebody told me how to say this. Chaudhry. I think I've been doing it wrong all along. Do you think they are waiting for DNA tests to come back, or waiting on forensics to return some answers that they can track suspects down? I think DNA is huge. Like Paul said, I can't imagine that they don't already have a profile that they're working against. But, they've now made detentions. I think, like I said, this is one person they were looking at. They probably did a buccal swab of this person, but it's going to take maybe 48 hours to get that person's profile to then make the comparison. It's not fingerprints, right? You got to sample fingerprint, your suspect fingerprint. You could fingerprint somebody and do the analysis as you sit there. DNA is going to take a little bit more time to have it all processed and everything sent to Florida where they're doing this. And I don't know if they can hold that person during that time. But like Paul said, if they're not surveilling this person, I'd be shocked. So thank you for that. Maureen from Monterey, you're so kind. Thank you for the super sticker. TU Toys, my friend Phil, has been a member for 11 months, everybody. Golf clap. Josh in LA, New York, Paul, what a great combo. Yeah, we got you covered coast to coast. Granite Man, thank you for the super chat, says 35 retired police officer. Abduction is abnormal. Yeah, I agree. Abduction, certainly in a case where what I think this is some sort of other crime gone bad. Usually you don't take the person. The abduction is abnormal. Again, Granite Man says, why keep calling this kidnapping? Well, it is kidnapping, even technically, even if the crime was something else, right? The body, the person was still moved out of that home, which is still kidnapping. But you make an excellent point. I don't think it was pre-designed as a kidnapping, but great point, Granite Man. Thank you for that. Derek Sherman says, Brian Anton reported today that it was a federal warrant from last night. Okay, so that is interesting, because we're all trying to figure out who's taking the lead on this. Federal warrant, state warrant, doesn't really matter end of the day who got the warrant and how it was secured, but that is interesting to know. So thank you for that, Derek Sherman. Heather Cooper Smith, thank you for the super sticker. Very kind of you. DBL HTR2 says, is it true the Range Rover was sold by a suspect dealer who follows TMZ and a purchaser who is tied to the searched residence or a member of Tommaso's band? That was a flock that just flew over my head there. I have no idea about any of that stuff. I know there's a Range Rover, which I think is interesting because of the point that I said. That looks like a kind of late model Range Rover too. I don't think that was like, that to me is an expensive vehicle. I'd like one of those. I can't afford those things. So how, what does that say about the individual who was driving it around? I don't know anything about this, about the dealer follows TMZ residents. I know that I will say this. There was a lot of people going around last night trying to talk about the address and if that was connected to a person in local politics. That is not true. We do know that they just happen to confuse or get a different address, and this poor guy's life is now being blown up, and he has nothing to do with this whole thing. So thank you for that. Debbie Harrow, thank you for this. Wow. Thank you for that super sticker, Debbie Harrow. That's incredibly generous of you. I appreciate that. That is very, very nice. Nate J3Z, thank you for the super chat, says over 13,000 watching and only 2.1 likes. Hit that like button. That's right. Leave your DNA on that like button, everybody. Tiff, I know her, says Dr. Vonda K, thank you so much for supporting the mods with coffees. Thank you for that. Grizzly Bear Kelly D has been a member for 7 months. Thank you for covering this so well. Appreciate you for saying that. All right. You guys, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for sticking with us. I'm going to continue doing this as long as there's a reason to do it. We were debating whether or not to go live today because, you know, we don't want to just hop on here to talk about the same thing we've been talking about. But there are updates. And as long as there's something to talk about, we will be jumping on here talking to you all about it. So let me get you some announcements and get you all out of here. First of all, like I said, we've been doing this continuing coverage. I think we started on Monday and we've been every single day. So you've got a whole week's worth of stuff to go through. And a lot of that is still good information. It's not like this is aging out very quickly. So if you want to go back and watch those older episodes from this week about the Nancy Guthrie coverage on our channel, please do it. Jenny G, thank you for the super chat. Says, I heard on another show that there is emergency exceptions to Miranda in regards to kidnapping. I wasn't aware of this. Can you explain? There are usually emergency exceptions to almost anything in the sense of we're not going to worry all that much about constitutional rights and evidence rules if we're trying to save somebody's life. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that they can, you know, go in, grab somebody, put a gun to their head, say, tell me, where is she? And then use that against them in court? No, but you can, the courts will look back on perhaps, they will scrutinize with less, they will analyze with less scrutiny missteps in Miranda advisements when you were dealing with exigent circumstances. That was a very lawyerly way of saying, if you screw up somehow in your advisements of rights, that might otherwise be a technical reason to kick that out, but you're dealing with a fast moving and emergency situation, the courts are going to probably look a little more forgiving on that. So thank you for that, Jenny G, for bringing that up. Pamela or Pantufel, thank you, says, I got an 81-year-old mom watching Quorum Confidential. Yes. Well, hello to Pantufel's mom. Thank you so much for being here. Wolfie says, thanks, Josh. Your work is much appreciated. Appreciate you for saying that. Okay. So everything that you missed last week, please watch it. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we're doing Sunday Fun Day. We're gonna get to our questions. I've been going through them. I know it's been 2 weeks and I just couldn't do it to you guys again. So tune in, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. We will be going through a lot of your questions. Let me say this so that nobody's throwing tomatoes at me already. There's a lot, and I can't get to all of them, but I'm going to get to every subject matter that you guys have asked. If your question doesn't get answered, don't get upset. It wasn't personal. Please call back and answer again. I was just trying to, you know, if I answer everything, we'll be here from that Sunday to the following Sunday. So please tune in tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern for Sunday Fun Day, where we're going through all of your questions. All right. Let me thank the following folks who did become members over the last week. We've had an influx of new members. It's the cool kids table, everybody. That's why we got all these new folks. Laurel Carlson, Violet Sky, Cody's Voice, I'm Jess Saying, Stephanie Slaughters, Ruth Lynn, Jana Arkeo Nitz, Marcia, retired trial lawyer, Luna Blue, Deanna Damantakop, no, wait a minute. Damata Copland, Mojo Mole, Linda Griffin, Pat Namola, Ryder Erwin, Linda Elliott, R. Shelka, Rachel Wyatt. Do you save all the tough ones and put them all in the same list for me at once? Beacon of Hope, Miss Parks in the House, The Unraveling of FKR, Michael Galera, SJLD Films, Julia Walsh, Sweet Lorraine, Kiko Martin, Susan Vaughn, and Orca Lover. Thank you guys so much for joining. If you want to be a part of the crew. Oh, we hit 73,000, everybody. That's incredible. If you would love to be part of our membership, we do a lot of fun stuff. Kaylin, Tiffany put a lot of work into it, as do I. Please check out our membership program at thecourtroomconfidential.com. But let me give a very, very special thank you to my friend Paul Mauro for joining us. That guy works harder than anybody I know, and he's very dedicated to what he does. He does not view what he does as just simply talking about the news. He's out there kicking bushes as much as anybody else, trying to get information to not only share it with us, but also share it with law enforcement. Like, you know, he feels, I think, very much a part of trying in the overall effort to bring back Nancy alive. So thank you to Paul Mauro. Please check out his Twitter and website. Very big shout out to Afton, Shigal, Kathy, and Therapist, you know, our fantastic mods. Thank you to Kaylin for, as always, doing stuff on the fly. She's finding tweets and throwing them up there, and you're amazing. And Tiffany, thank you for being the best thing that ever happened to me. Thank you guys so much. We will see you all here tomorrow for Sunday Fun Day. Take care. Bye-bye.